student-led tours. They went to 4 classes and got asked a lot of questions by students, some give and take. They got to have lunch with the students, and then at the end of the day, there was a forum with the faculty where they were both together, going back and forth with the same questions, and now it's candidates on their own. And so this is the last part of the public process, and then after this, the Principal Search Advisory Committee, which Bonnie and I co-facilitate, that includes faculty and students from BHS and some district folks and parents as well, will convene Tuesday, I think, next week. I think it is, Monday or Tuesday, Monday morning. And we will go through all the feedback that comes in through a feedback survey that will get pushed out to everybody today, this evening. And we will go over our notes, and we will make recommendations to the superintendent. The superintendent likes us to, if we're moving forward more than one candidate, to rank them. But at that point, it goes to the superintendent. The superintendent does his own round of interviews, reference checks, and from there makes a recommendation to the school board. So that's the process. The hope is to have this presented to the board, I think the first week we're back in May. Is that right, Claire? Yeah. So that's sort of the timeline right now. So are there any sort of clarifying procedural questions before we start?
And I would add that the final interview with Tom includes me and Stephanie.
Yes, Stephanie Phillips, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and Bonnie Johnson-Ayton. Thanks. There is a mic set up there because Media Factory was nice enough to set it up, but we're not doing questions from the audience. At the end, Amy can spend a few minutes just talking to people individually. Then I'll go down and get Deb, and she'll come up, and then Amy will leave, and that's that. So I am happy to introduce Amy Rex. She will let you know all about her, and she has 35 minutes. I have a series of questions, so I'll sit over there. I'll come up, ask the question, and then when Amy's done, Amy just turn to me for the next question. I'll come up and do the next question. Bonnie will, if we feel like you're going way too fast or way too slow, Bonnie will just give you some visual clues. Okay? Thank you. So, I was going to sit down now. So the first question is one that you've had several times today, Amy, even from some students I noticed. Why Burlington High School and why now?
Okay, great. So I'm currently a superintendent at the Milton Town School District, so that is a very pertinent question, and I think, as I was starting to move into my successor contract, I wanted to pause and really think about where do I want to sort of land myself in terms of really finding the most joy and purpose in my work. And so kind of questioning that maybe the superintendency is not that part for me, and have a lot of admiration for my high school principals, have been spending a lot of time in the high school, have found myself more and more drawn to sort of the hubs where the students are, and just asking myself that question. I was a principal for 9 years, and 5, 6, 7, 8 of that was with high school students, and so I thought, this might be something that I want to return to. And Burlington High School is attractive to me, one, because of the size. I believe it would provide me with an excellent challenge, and also its commitment and the advanced work that it has done with equity and diversity, and sort of its very progressive strategic plan and goals are very appealing to me. And so putting those elements all together, I found myself here. So.
Can folks hear Amy well enough? Because I can't hear the speaker. Oh, sorry. Can folks hear her well enough? No. No. Can we turn that up?
Sit closer.
Oh, that's not your system. Okay, if someone else wants to try and do that.
Should I talk louder? Is that better?
You can just pull the microphone forward. Tell me if now it's loud.
Oh, that.
Give it a try.
How's that?
That's better.
I'll talk softly so that it's loud, but not,
Does it yeah.
doesn't do that.
Great. Thanks, Amy. So
Just pull this closer. How's that? Is that better? Okay, all right, great.
based upon what you observed during your day-to-day at BHS, speak to what you saw in terms of the needs of our students and what our strengths and challenges are.
So it's not so much what I observed, but what the students told me. And I had a fabulous experience and asked every group that I was in if everybody was having their best day, teachers, administrators, students, support staff, what would school look like and feel like and sound like to them? And, some really strong themes came out across all the different student groups that I talked with. And, connections, wanting to have stronger connections with each other and with their teachers, having a setting in which they feel that they can communicate with teachers and that there can be flexibility in their learning opportunities and in sort of how the day unfolds. And I think we all know that our students are experiencing high levels of stress and anxiety, and if they're having an off day, that shouldn't count against them, that they should still be able to be present and also have some forgiveness around that. So that was one of the themes that I'd heard. And also, that sense of belonging and community unity. And so then I asked, well, what were the barriers from some of that happening? And they spoke to the facility, that does, there's not a large space where we can bring students together and do some of the, types of activities that are often done at high school level to forge those kind of relationships and sense of community. And then they, talked about how is it that student voice can be heard more regularly with either administrator or teachers so that there's this common understanding of what everyone's experiencing and that we could work collaboratively together to, put some fixes on that. And so that's really what I heard from them today.
The Burlington School District promotes deep learning opportunities for all students. When you think of deep learning, what might that look like at Burlington High School?
So for me, I was a principal during the passing of Act 77 and did a lot of transformation work. I was at Harvard Union High School, and really that was our focus, was around deeper learning and student engagement. And so not only the flexible pathways, but ensuring that students were getting into those opportunities early. So even in 7th and 8th grade, but also certainly 9th grade, having opportunities. Every student did a job shadow, and so that they could start to understand what were the resources in my community, what was some interest that I might have, what are the skills and knowledge that I need to have if that's something of interest to me that I want to pursue. And students need those hooks, right? And they need to feel like what they're doing has purpose in their life. And so the more that we can provide them those structured opportunities to do those kinds of explorations, it could be through service learning opportunities, it could be through intergenerational opportunities, whether that's bringing people in or having students go out to organizations where they can interact with elders. It could be some student and teacher designed project-based learning together. And I think that when those opportunities exist, students do go deeper with their learning because they're invested in it. And I do think that our students struggle, and maybe even more so today than they did when I was a principal back at Harwood, with a rigorous schedule where it's class after class after class, and then it's home with the homework, And sometimes they don't see the connections or the purpose in really clear ways. And so I think there's lots of creative things that we could do. You know, I think Burlington is at an advantage because your community is right here, and it's extensive. And, you know, a lot of the schools in the rest of the state of Vermont, you know, travel, you know, they're out in isolated areas. So, and I believe that this community also demonstrates an interest in wanting to support its students because they are our future, and we want them to carry on the vibrancy of our communities.
The next question is, describe how you demonstrate your commitment to anti-racism at the personal, social, and systemic levels, and what does this look like as a principal?
Sure. So at the personal level, it's about my own learning, and that needs to be ongoing, and, you know, having opportunities to interact with others to help that learning and sort of test my own self-awareness and my commitments. And the social level is kind of interesting because I really have no social life. So I don't really, you know, so I have to think about it in terms of the social fabric in schools because that's where I spend the majority of my time. But I think that my commitment on the social level is helping to raise the awareness of others, especially within the community, and advocating on the behalf of students. So when harm is done, making sure that it has been addressed and that the, you know, students have a voice and are, you know, recognized that it's that we care about them and that this matters and that sometimes accountability has to happen and that sometimes can be really difficult on a social level. But sometimes as a school principal, you have to make decisions, and I think our principals across the state have been making notable ones where maybe at a sports game they're not allowing the fans to come in because of some harm that had been done. So it's really about what are we doing to protect our students and ensuring that they're safe. And at the systemic level, you know, that really looks like, you know, changing our practices as educators to ensure that our teaching and learning is culturally and linguistically responsive, that students aren't experiencing the kinds of microaggressions that historically they have and continue to on many levels. And it's looking at our policies and our procedures through equity tools. There's great tools out there that help schools assess, you know, everything from procedures and policies to just day-to-day practices. And there's also more and more great resources about, you know, how do you instruct in ways that is really responsive and inclusive. And, you know, many of our teachers haven't had to think through that lens ever. And so it's really a change in their practice. And so, you know, as a principal, it's critical that you're providing the time, the space, and the resources to allow all your teachers to participate and all of staff members in that type of education so that they can show up and be the best that they can be every day for our students.
What does it mean for a school to be welcoming to students, to families, and to staff?
Sure. So the students, again, spoke to that today, and they know what it means, and they know what they want, and so it's important for us to listen and to have conversations amongst ourselves, and sort of, you know, you need to reflect, you need to kind of look in the mirror and say, what can we do that's different? Well, how can we change so that we do seem more welcoming to those that don't feel like we're very welcoming? And so they need to participate in that process, as we all do. And for them, what I heard today was about being seen in the curriculum, about having opportunities to build that community in which education is happening in terms of acceptance and belonging and harassment. There were a lot of questions about bullying and harassment, and we talked about how important it is that there's a lot of preventative education that needs to happen, and when harm is done, there's even more education that has to happen, and that those will all contribute to a welcoming school. In terms of families, they're our greatest asset. They know their children the best, and I believe that parents need to be part of, and families need to be part of their child's learning journey. And so that looks like, having conversations with teachers, coming into the building when they're able to, and, opportunities for us to showcase the excellent work that students are doing. I've been so impressed today in just seeing some artwork and some student academic work hanging on the walls. And is there a way that we're showcasing that with our families? That brings a sense of pride to them to see what their children are doing, and then we also need to maybe have really structured, organized ways to bring families in. In the past, I've done things like school dialogues or learning sessions, and having it facilitated by youth, so that brings in families because they want to see what students have to offer in that way. But it helps them feel like they're part of the learning process and that they're contributing and giving input into the way that we want to be as a learning community. To staff, nobody works harder than educators, and we want them to feel like they belong as well. And it's just touching base with them as often as you can as a principal, checking in with people. How are you doing? What do you need? What's on your mind? And then also building opportunities for them to come together in formal and informal ways, to work together, to build colleagueship, and to build their own community. And that might be, fun things like, the ultimate Frisbee game, or even, staff-student games, those kind of things that make people really feel part of a community.
The goal statement of our 5-year strategic plan says every student is challenged, empowered, and engaged in their learning throughout their time in our schools. What are some concrete steps that you might take as the next BHS principal toward making this a reality for all of our students?
So I talked a little bit about the Act 77 work and that personalized learning approach. I think what I've learned today in a very short period of time is that there's a lot of systems already in place that are supporting students to be empowered, engaged, and what's the other one there? You got challenged. And I think it's a matter of within those systems and structures, where is BHS struggling? And where do we need to fill in those gaps? I don't think we need to reinvent anything. I think a lot of great work is going on here. And so it's about building on what's already here and making it better. And, ensuring that I always think of everything in terms of students and teachers, too, for that matter, in sort of 3 layers. We have that foundational layer of what we're providing all students, and then we have, the second layer of what does some other things that we need to have in place that some students may need to, get that extra support or to get that extra challenge, right? To go deeper with something if that's the way it needs to be. And so some of that might be like at the classroom level, some of that might be through the teacher advisory, the personal learning plans. All those are really great pieces. So how do we continue to strengthen those and just, ensure that students are all getting really what they need to do. And not to be afraid to think out of the box. And to, when teachers have innovative ideas, we need to embrace that. And because our students are ready for something different, right? And some of them are already a little bit ahead of us. So how can we work with our students and our faculty and the community to really ensure that, all the students are getting what they need for a great education?
What is your communication style with caretakers, students, faculty, and staff?
I prefer face-to-face communication. I still struggle with the doing the texting thing and all that stuff. And you learn so much more in those face-to-face conversations. And it allows you to build a stronger understanding, a stronger sense of empathy. What's that experience that any one of those individuals might be having across those stakeholder groups. And I enjoy doing a lot of written communication, but I also know that that has to be translated into other mechanisms. So whether that's a video chat or more visually appealing kind of display. For my faculty newsletter recently, I've done just a 4-square memo. It's just 4 squares, 1 sheet of paper, and so they can kind of scan it. And there's always a little bit of a read more section if they want to go deeper, but they get the gist of it, and then they can kind of move on. People are busy, they get a lot of correspondence, and so we know that that sort of scan approach is helpful. And I also think in terms of my communication style, I always want to hear the story first before I speak. And so, whether it's with a family or a student issue or a staff, what is it that they want me to know? And then what it is do they need from me? And maybe it's just to listen to me. Maybe they don't want anything. Or maybe they want, me to help facilitate solving some problems or getting resources or whatever it might be. But that's typically sort of my process in that way, shape.
How have you worked with community partners in the past to support your students? And how would you envision working with the larger Burlington community in support of our schools?
So community partners, I think some of the work that I've done there is with, through the Act 77, colleges, and another organization called Up for Learning, and a lot of mental health services. So in the different areas that I've worked in, either Washington County Mental Health or Howard Services. And then Outright Vermont is another organization that I've worked a lot with. So, I think a lot of that is reaching out to them when maybe I'm stuck and I need someone to help me think through something. On behalf of the students or staff, or maybe it's to help with some education, to come in and do the pieces, or maybe it's to, give our students some opportunities. And, so whether that is, again, through one of the flexible pathways, if it's, student internships or job shadows, that type of thing, and working with them there. Certainly in my role now, I work with a lot of, town and, the Economic Development Commission or the town manager and those kinds of things, because it's really is a partnership between the school district and the town or the city, because we have common interests in terms of, wanting to grow and make it a vibrant community, and students are really an important part of that. So how can we involve them? I am not afraid to do outreach with people and to find out what are the resources out there that I need, and then, don't be afraid to ask, because, maybe they say no, but that's the worst they'll say. So in working on behalf of schools.
Two more questions.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Describe your ability with examples of a time when you were asked to bring people together to heal and create a climate and culture that is restorative. And if you don't have any example, describe how you would prepare to approach this critical and necessary work.
So, this is a hard one. When I was at Harwood, I was there when we lost the 5 students in the car accident. And, we were doing amazing work in bringing our community together. But at one point, one of the outside consultants said to me, "Your staff is splitting. You have staff that still need to heal and do some work around this, and then you have staff that just want to move on, and there's a split between them, and there's a tension, and it if you don't address it, it could really be detrimental to students and learning and the school." And so, sort of had to wrap my head around that, and what could we do to sort of, address it. And, I did some research, and I found that a process that it was being used in Africa with children who had lost their parents to AIDS during the AIDS epidemic there, and it was about sort of how to recreate your community, have hope and renewal, so I sort of adapted that process, and with the help of some community partners, was able to get enough people to help me facilitate. So I sort of wrote the proposal. We asked the board for a couple of days without students to sort of go through this lengthy process. It helped. Did it work for everybody? Probably not, but we went through a series of activities. We started with individuals, and then, into small groups, and by the end of the 2 days, we had a display that everybody had contributed to in building sort of this tree of life and of hope, and recognizing all the assets of our community, and we kind of put it together in a space, and people spoke to it if they wanted to or not. But there's lots of resources out there, I know that, and to do repair and restorative work, and that can be with communities, it can be with small groups, it can be between teachers and students. But I truly believe that, when you bring people together, even if it's really hard, good things come from it, and we shouldn't be afraid to do it when we need to.
Thanks, Amy. So the last question is really for you, anything you want to share with us. So is there something we didn't ask you that you would like us to know about you?
I really love this work. I love being an educator, and it brings me great joy. The students bring me great joy. I saw amazing students today here, and they care about themselves, and they care about this school, and they wanted to be able to do great things, and I think the faculty and staff want to see them do great things. And So it's a real opportunity. You have a gift here. So.
So if you're willing to hang out for like 5 minutes,
Sure.
if people have questions or whatever, I'll go downstairs. Oh, you'll go? Okay, all right. And then I also realized, by the way, because so many of you are familiar, I didn't even introduce myself. I didn't want to interrupt you once you got started. I didn't. I did not. So I'm Victor Prusek. I'm the coordinator of the Office of Engagement. So nice to have you all here. Welcome back, everyone. We have our second candidate today, Deb Beaupre. Thank you for coming, Deb. It's been a long day for both candidates. As I said before, they've been here since 10 o'clock, and they're on the spot the whole time. So really happy that you're here. Thank you for being here. So yes, as Bonnie said, I'm going to read through the questions one at a time. Whenever you're done with the question, just look over at me, pause, look down on your paper, whatever.
Okay.
I'll probably get it.
Okay.
But if you're not done, just say, I'm not finished.
Okay.
So it's all good. So the first question you've actually heard today from students, from, I think possibly from the staff forum today. Why Burlington High School and why now?
Hi, everybody. My name is Deb Beaupre. So Burlington High School, to me, this would be a job that I would take really just to make me happy. Currently, I work in a high school in New Hampshire, majority white space and majority white students, which there's nothing wrong with. That's not an issue for me, but it would be nice for me to work with people of color, students of color, and also to work in a place that is interested in hearing from all voices and welcoming those voices. And for years now, I've been toying with the idea of coming here and hadn't really made that move, but my children are grown and mostly gone. My youngest kid goes to UVM, so she's, doing her thing. And, yeah, so, and then, to me, Burlington, I'm from Boston. Burlington gives me a Cambridge vibe, which is, for those of you who know Cambridge, like I just like it. And it feels very comfortable and familiar to me because I went to Somerville High. I'm from Somerville. And so my school looked like this. And so it's been unusual for me all these years to have super small schools. My kids went to a K-8. They were with the same kids they knew from preschool, and really, really small. And majority white. My kids are biracial. And I think there were times that was hard for them. And we had to decide, will we stay here? Will we go back to Boston? My husband is from a New Hampshire farming family, and I'm not sure he could adjust. We lived in Brattleboro for 5 minutes, and he had like a nervous tick the whole time. But he needs to, you know what I mean? So this would really just be for me, because this work is work that I'm good at. I'm already doing it, and to come here would be like doing this work in a place that makes me feel like it's a treat. To be honest with you. Do you know what I mean? I saw more black and brown students than I've seen, let me think, since the 90s. So that's important, at least. That's important to me. So that's, yeah. Hey, Victor, I'm done. Okay.
Thank you, Deb. Based upon what you observed during your day today at the high school, speak to what you saw in terms of the needs of our students and what our strengths and challenges are.
I asked all the student groups I met with today and students I met with just randomly, what's the one thing that they wish this school had? Would anyone like to guess? Okay, well, there was windows. Yes, windows did come up quite a bit. And a new school came up, but there was something else that ran through. That came up less often. No, what they all said in different forms all day long was that they felt like they wanted to feel connected to each other and to their teachers. And we talked about that. We also did talk about the lack of windows and so forth, and we tried to figure out, like I said to them, well, what do you think it would look like if everybody could go out for lunch, not just juniors and seniors? And they were like, what? And I was like, well, I'm just thinking, right? I mean, because everybody in this building is vitamin D deprived. I've been here all day, like, and the heat's on, it's hot. I won't stop complaining about that. It's super hot. And as a woman of a certain age, like, I don't need to bring heat into my life if I don't need to. So that spoke to me, because for some reason they don't feel like they have that. And if you think about it, the teachers here have gone through more than the teachers in other places. Like, it was unprecedented for the entire world to be shutting down, you know what I mean? Like, when we figured out that it was coming, people were like, oh, this district closed. But it was still news for everybody, because when do you close and it's not a snowstorm? Even that hurricane, like that, you know what I mean? So all the schools went, I call it takeout. We did takeout school all of a sudden, and then we did Zoom school in, like, your home closet or whatever you were trying to make up at your house to be a classroom. And then we had the vaccine push, and then we had different variants. But now the majority of the world is unmasked and back at school, but not the kids and the teachers here. They're unmasked, but now they're not in their school. And so they don't have, like, all the hang out in the front, walk around. They don't have that. And I think I think it's wearing on them. And let's see, strengths and challenges. I think there's a lot of people here who really want students to succeed. And there's a lot of systems here where people are trying to figure out how to lift up students and capture them so that there aren't students who get to junior year and people are like, wait, how come we never knew about this particular kid? Do you get what I mean? I thought my tour was going to classes and students ask me questions, so I don't have a sense of what the teaching is like here. That's something I would really appreciate seeing and knowing more about. But I think the strengths of this school is just the resilience of everybody who comes into this building every single day, because this is hard, super hard. What? Okay. And I think some of the challenges, the fact that kids don't always feel that connection, that's a challenge. But I think I have been wondering about this afternoon, if it's just easy to sort of rabbit hole and think, this is this and this is that, because they don't have access to the air. They don't get outside and take a break. We don't really think of high schoolers as having recess, but recess exists for a reason. And it would be nice if we could figure out a way to help kids get outside, reset, walk around, be kids, and then come back. That was actually the second thing I heard the most, that we can't leave and go outside. We can't get outside and get some air. So today, there was a fire drill in the middle of one of my conversations. An actual fire, a thing. So we all left, and that was kind of cool. And when it was time to go back, the only people rushing to go back were the kitchen staff, and the kids were like, mosey. That was funny. So that's my answer based on a few hours here. Hey, Victor, I'm ready.
The Burlington School District promotes deep learning opportunities for all students. When you think of deep learning, what might that look like at Burlington High School?
Oh, well, does that question presume that there isn't deep learning happening here?
No.
Okay.
I would say there's a presumption that we could have more.
Oh, okay. Well, deep learning, I think, is looking at how whatever it is that you're doing can actually help you or apply in your regular life. That's what, right? Something that for you really to get enriched in an experience. So today I went to a cafe run out of a special ed classroom, and that's an example of deep learning. The kids are learning how to, what do we have to buy, and how much does it cost, and how do we bring in customers? Although it's only for adults, so that just feels a little. But adults need a little something every now and then, so that feels okay. But I think that deep learning experiences are experiences in which a student gets a chance to see a larger version of themselves, a different version of themselves. Because I think that's what education is for, to give you a different version of yourself. I mean, there are jobs that exist now that I have no idea what those jobs actually are, and I think that that's part of the problem, that we don't even know what people could do. You know, years ago, when we would ask kids, not years ago, but my kids were teenagers 10 years ago, they'd be like, I want to be a YouTuber. And I would be like, that is not a real job. But guess what? Yes, it is. Or I want to be a TikToker. And I'd be like, what is TikTok? Or they would say, just all kinds of stuff like that. There's all kinds of things that kids can do. There's colleges devoted to gaming. What? So all those hours of your kid in the basement that you've been worried about, that could work out. And so I think that what we have to figure out how to do is to connect students with people who are doing some of the things that they like to do. I think that it's hard, and kids hate school a lot of times. I was a kid who hated school. I think that school is frustrating because it feels like, okay, fine. When am I going to talk about the Battle of Hastings in my life? Just saying. And what does this mean for me? But if we look at, not the Battle of Hastings, but if we look at revolutions, for example, across the ages and across continents, then can those inform where we are right now? Who are other people in history who were community activists? Because if that's your thing and you really want to fight injustice, okay, yes, you could become a lawyer. Like, that's one of the things that we always think of. But what about becoming a community organizer? There was this guy who did that, and then he became a senator, and then he became a president. And not saying that every single person has to be the president, but disruptors have changed history. So I think that when we think about deep learning, I think it looks like meeting students where they are, asking them what it is they want to know, and seeing how we can figure out how to make that happen, which is an interesting question. How many of you have kids in college now? Yeah, and college is offering, like, we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and we have, chefs for everything. When I went to college, it was like, that's it right there, eat that. And if I was like, well, no, I was wondering if yeah, that's it, there you go. And that's what we ate. So when my daughter says to me, oh, Mom, the vegan cafe wasn't, and they didn't have gluten-free, I'm like, I ate mac and cheese and Dinty Moore stew every single day. So I think that we need to figure out how to catch up with the world. We need to catch up with them and see, okay, what is it that you need to do? And how can we tailor what we offer here for you to help you do that? But we also have to just be comfortable with the fact that 15-year-olds don't always know what they want to do. They think they do. They don't always know. And how can we equip them for the skills that help them go out and try something? Hey, Victor.
Describe how you demonstrate your commitment to anti-racism at the personal, social, and systemic levels. And what does this look like as a principal?
how I demonstrate my commitment to anti-racism at the personal, social, and systemic levels. Well, that's interesting. At the personal level, I'm committed to anti-racism because people need not to be surprised that I'm in the room. I've been doing this for a long time. I know what I'm doing, and lots of times I get questions that or pushback that doesn't speak to understanding that, right? And I'm, depending on what your idea of it is in your head, I'm not necessarily what people think of when they think of a principal, right? So I show up different. It's different. In my cover letter, I said it's different to have me in the building in the same way it was different for Sasha Malia Obama to have a swing set on the lawn of the White House, right? It's different. It just, all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's just different. So for me personally, when people say things to me that I think are inappropriate, I try to come from a place of, or if that's one of the issues, but I try to come from a place of curiosity and love, because it's not cool to swear at people at work. So I don't do that. But for example, I'll give you an example. Somebody came over to me the other day and said, hey, I want to ask you a cultural appropriation question. And what I really wanted to say is, let me stop you right there. Because I'm not, in my role where I am now, I'm not hired here to be an equity person. I'm not all things cultural appropriate or whatever. Like, I just happen to be doing this, and I just happen to be Black. So sometimes I have to create boundaries with people and say to them, hold on a second. Some of this work that you are trying to get me to help you with is your own work. Old me, that's because I'm in my 50s now, and I'm rounding up to 60 in a week. And in my 30s, my 20s and 30s, I would have knocked myself out to explain things to people and to help them understand and all of that. And now I can say to, I don't say to somebody, Google it, don't come to me with that. But I will say, here's ways that you can find some resources. And because I realize that it's hard when you live in a place where maybe you don't come in contact with a lot of people of color. You want to have you want to get some questions answered, and you don't always know who's safe. So I try to be safe, but sometimes I have to make a boundary. My commitment to anti-racism at the social level, I'm not sure exactly what that means. What does that mean?
I think it's connected to personal, so some of these,
Okay.
I think you've addressed that.
And systemically, so prior to this, I have always, prior to the job I have now in a well-resourced district, I've worked in underserved communities my entire life. I don't know how familiar you are with Newport, New Hampshire, but it's a lot like Bellows Falls, like Springfield. That's where I worked the majority of my career, but I also worked in Fitchburg, Mass., which is a lot like Springfield, Bellows Falls. And so I'm all about advocating for students and what they need, especially if money is the obstacle. And I think that so much of work around underserved students and issues of class also links into, it intersects with racism, so with issues of race. And so this is one of those things that I've been thinking about for a really long time. I spend time thinking about school. And so what that looks like for me as a principal is me sharing with teachers some of the ways I think that we as schools create obstacles that we never intended to create for parents. I'll give you an example. We get this great idea, and we're like, ooh, let's do this. We can do that in 3 weeks. And then we create a flyer for it, and we send it, or we email it, and we send it out thinking 3 weeks is enough time to have people come, right? But some people's work schedules are set 3 months in advance. Some people only have their kids on every other weekend or whatever, and they can't do that. And so here we are setting up a situation where a kid will come home and say, hey, can you come to this? And then the parent has to say, no, I can't. That's a horrible feeling. And as a teacher, I miss so many things in my own children's lives, and it makes you feel horrible. And that's just an example of a barrier. So I like to try to help remind people in my work as a principal and assistant principal about the dynamics that sometimes are coming to play that we don't always take into consideration. Because we live in school land, and not everybody lives in school land. I feel like part of my mission in life is to ask a lot of questions that can sometimes make people uncomfortable, but to ask questions that need to be asked. So for example, some of the documents that I read about a summer institute for students talked about about students feeling there's a disproportionate amount of them who are of color who get some sort of discipline. And so part of me, for one of the things I would be doing is unpacking that and talking to people and saying, this is what I'm looking at. And I may be coming to you, teachers, to say, okay, can you walk me through how this goes and how it is that certain kids keep getting tossed out of I'm making this up. I don't know that this is what happens, tossed out of your class. But that's part of what I'm here for, or part of what my role is as an instructional leader, is to ask people about their practice and not to catch them on the hot seat. That's not what I mean, but to ask them a question and see what they have to say. And then that probably leads to more questions. That's why everywhere I go, Bonnie sits in front of me with a timer, like, knock it off. Because I ask a lot of questions.
So now you have 6 questions
Okay,
and 12 minutes.
okay. Go. Why don't you just stand there and not leave?
What does it mean for a school to be welcoming to students, to families, and to staff?
I think we need to be we need to try 15,000 ways to reach families, because even though I'm a teacher, my husband's a teacher, giving my kid a piece of paper was tantamount to lying, just yelling out my name out the window, Dad, there's something, because life is busy, and 5 to 8 is forget it. Did you do your homework? Yes, great, okay, good, we're moving on. So I think that we need to figure out as many ways as possible to let people understand and know what we're doing, how school is similar to how it was when you went to school, and how it's different and why it's different and what's important about that. I think it's important for people to be out in the hallways knowing kids' names, saying hello, saying good morning. I said good morning to, 25 kids, and like 5 of them responded. I was like, hello, good morning. So sometimes it's the earbuds, but other times they're like, oh, you're talking to me? I'm like, yes, I'm talking to you. That happens in my current job now, too. Good morning. People just walk by. But I think that for all of us to be welcoming to families, we also need to make sure that families can we're producing documents and we're making materials available in people's languages so they can read them, and that we have people who can also help answer questions. Because for those of us who live in this world, there are so many things that we take for granted that we don't even realize there are steps to. Like I was in a classroom earlier today, and on the board, somebody wrote White Day, and I know what White Day means, but just think about that. Somebody who doesn't, what? So, Victor, ready?
The goal statement of our 5-year strategic plan says that every student is challenged, empowered, and engaged in their learning throughout their time in our schools. What are some concrete steps that you might take as the next Burlington High School principal toward making this a reality for all of our students?
For this one, I think we need to look at some data. I need to look at who's taking which kinds of classes. Do they feel like those classes are working? I think we need to do some surveying of students to find out how they feel about that. And also maybe some surveying of recent grads to ask them, when you got to wherever you went, what was that like? Did you feel like you were prepared? Did you feel like, and when you talk to your roommates, what is that like? Because that's the way for us to, that's a nice calibration for us to figure out what we have been trying to do for 13 years, how that looks in the world.
What is your communication style with caretakers, students, faculty, and staff?
I'm available all the time. I give my cell phone number out like candy. And because I'm happy for people to ask me questions. And that's not necessarily best practice, but if I can answer a question for you that you have at 9 o'clock at night, then that will stop all of the that can be happening at home. You know what I'm talking about? And I also, I listen quite a lot. Like I said, I like to ask questions, but I also like to just be friendly. I genuinely like talking to people. This is where C's in conduct have held me in good stead. Because I got C's for talking too much, every single year of my life. And I'm not Oprah, I don't own a show, but that's how it works. I can talk to anybody. And I have lots of different experiences. Plus, too, my kids were not perfect, and I wasn't perfect either. So I've been in the principal's office as the parent there, not as the principal. And I've had the police show up to my house, like, all of the things that has happened. How am I doing?
Good.
Yeah.
How have you worked with community partners in the past to support your students? How would you envision working with the larger Burlington community in support of our schools?
So one of the things that you told me, Victor, at my interview was that there are black and brown boys who seem to be struggling here. And one of the things that I was thinking is that I should reach out to the Divine Nine in the area, because there's probably black sororities and fraternities, even in small doses, who do community service. And something I did for my students when I first got to Hanover was I reached out to the Divine Nine are historically black fraternities and sororities. And even though Dartmouth or UVM aren't HBCUs, there are black students, they do pledge, they have Greek life. And so I had a student who was really feeling disconnected. She wanted to be an activist and things weren't moving fast enough for her. And I wrote there's a female sorority called Deltas. I wrote to the Deltas and said, can you help me? And they totally wrapped her up. It was all Zoom school, so that was weird, but they were there to be her people. And then they met together. People sent her books to read and just sent her like lots of little encouraging things. It's a small population of kids of color in Hanover. But that worked out so well. And all my family was Greek. I'm not. But that was one thing that I was thinking could help. And also, I'm heavily involved in my own church. And I think that the church network of people may, in fact, be an untapped resource. So at my school right now, I have some students who take driver's ed, and they don't have anybody to drive them. So I've asked around in the congregation if anybody wants to do that. And as long as it's not snowing, older folks will be like, yeah, we'll drive up and down the street with this person just to get their hours. So that's been kind of cool. Yeah, that's part of how I like to do things. I also like to see if people want to give us stuff for free, which is always nice. And one of the things I was thinking about in talking with the kids is that the Marriott over there has all these lovely spaces and Hotel Vermont, and no one's there. And I thought, well, what would that be like if they would let students go hang out there in a place? And they might be like, blah, because people who don't work with kids are a little freaked out by teenager energy, but maybe that could happen. So that's just one of those things I was thinking about.
You actually thought of something that we just started a couple weeks ago with one of our social workers at the Marriott.
No, sir.
Seriously.
Okay.
I didn't know that till I was actually waiting for you to come for the interview. And I saw some people come in, and I asked them what they were doing. He's like, oh, we meet with students here once in a while. And it's free.
Nice. Okay.
It's great. It's a great partnership.
Yeah.
Love that thinking. Free is good. I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Should I keep talking? I could do stand-up. Describe, describe your ability with examples of a time when you were asked to bring people together to heal and create a climate and culture that's restorative. And if you don't have an actual example, describe how you would prepare to approach this critical and necessary work here.
So I was a principal of a small school in Vermont, and in that school, like in a lot of small schools, kids had been together forever, and they only had one class, so they were always together, and so the dynamics of, eesh. And it turns out that there was one person who held quite a lot of power, and like to the tune of having people, yeah, I can't explain, I can't go into that. But it was a student who had a lot of power, and a lot of people were afraid of this person. And so I conducted what I thought was going to be a small bullying investigation that got really big, which is fine. And we were able to create some respite for the other students, to put that student just in a different spot, they weren't excluded, they were just in a different spot for like recess, in order for the other kids to understand how school is supposed to go. And it was a big deal. When I do HHB investigations, when I have kids in my office and they tell me things that they have gone through, I say to them, I'm really sorry that happened, and that's not actually how it's supposed to be. And sometimes that's the first time they've heard that. 95% of the kids I talk to who are having a problem, I always ask them this question, and they always say no. Have you told your parents? And they always say no. And then I say to them, I'm going to put my mom hat on, I'll tell you right now, your parents absolutely want to know that. And then everybody cries. So that experience of sort of changing the vibe in that grade that also affected other grades helped free a lot of kids up, because kids, I know that equity and trauma and lots of other things are really important, but I also think consent is super important, because there's the kid whose parents make them the amazing lunch, and every day there's somebody saying, ooh, can I have some of that? And kids don't always know how to say no. You know what I mean? So that's an issue that can be freeing to help them advocate for themselves.
So the last question is there something we didn't ask you that you'd like us to know about you?
No. No, thank you. May I ask a question? What is it that you think this school needs? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of what this school needs? Please.
A commitment from a leader. Unfortunately, it's really hard to have had so much change.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody who is in it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many people agree with that? Give me a show of hands. Okay. What else? We all agree. Oh.
I think vision.
Mm-hmm.
I want vision. I mean, this is my third kid going through.
Poor child.
Oh, sorry. The question I asked was, oh, sorry, of leader who, commitment, and then vision. Some vision.
For all our kids.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Ma'am.
Strength, inner strength, and then community strength, because we are, our future is so bright here. We have an amazing city, surrounded by higher institutions of learning.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people who gravitate here for education,
Mm-hmm.
celebrate it, and to be able to be an anomaly in a state, to be building a new high workforce development. Our students feel that energy,
Mm-hmm.
and they want someone to own the house. Own it in a way that's community, that they care. So from opening the door, saying hi every morning, all those things.
I don't know how to paraphrase what she just said. What were your first? Strength.
Spirit, yes, spirit and strength.
Spirit and strength, because our future is bright. I saw that on the signs, yes.
But just on that same note, I mean, for some kids, this is my third kid going to be this, for a lot of administrators, this is a transitional phase, right? Because some kids, this is going to be their only high school experience.
Right.
And so I would just like someone to really invest in, like, here we are, this is what we have, like your idea to be in the hotel or whatever, like, there are community spaces around us that we can use, like, how do we capitalize on that? How do we make these kids not feel like this is just a transition time for the whole administration, but it's really meaningful to them?
Yep.
How do we have, the community gatherings that we used to have, like theater and band and all those, I mean, I'm sure they still exist, but like, we just don't feel like a community, and I feel like we've heard someone say that, the kids have said that as well, so I feel like that's really important.
Yep. It feels like there's a lack of community space and space to gather and some of the events, and that for some kids, this is going to be their entire school career. Yeah.
I think that the context of Burlington is, there's a lot of negative things being said about Burlington, despite there's saying lots of positive things, that we all feel like there's lots of positive things here. But I think somebody who, helps us to feel pride again in that, in our school and our community. And
Is,
resonates that out so that other people see it. And on Facebook communities where people say, I'm moving from Brooklyn, where should I go? Burlington. It's like the,
ooh,
so sometimes people are like, it's too dangerous, or they don't have a high school.
right.
And they don't know, these are not people from Burlington saying this. And so we need to shine outside of this district as well.
So I'm going to try to paraphrase what you just said, that there's a lot of negative things and wrong thinking about what goes on here in this town and in this school, and we need people to understand that there's a lot of good that's happening here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You've been willing to stay for about 5 minutes, just people had
Sure.
informal questions. You don't have to sit.